So the line coming out of most of the folks covering yesterday's January 6th hearing is that we are much, much closer to Donald Trump now being actually prosecuted in a court of law for his activities during January 6th. To understand what exactly that means, like why exactly that may or may not be the case, we actually have to listen to the testimony of this bombshell witness. So the hearings were supposed to discontinue this week, and then they were going to take a break for a couple of weeks, and then they were going to come back for part 2 of the season drop of Stranger Things in a couple of weeks. Instead, they brought forward this bombshell surprise witness, Cassidy Hutchinson. She was a former White House aide to Mark Meadows, and she apparently had a lot of access because she was hanging around Mark Meadows a lot. And they brought her forth specifically because they were kind of leaking out to the press that they were afraid for her safety. They were afraid that it was going to leak that she was their big witness and there's going to be pressure brought to bear upon her. Okay, whatever. They bring her forth yesterday and she gives this testimony, and the media are just over the moon about this testimony. They think that this is the most stellar thing they have ever heard. It's groundbreaking. It's shocking. Right? I just want to start with the media reactions to her before we even get to her so that you understand the effect that Cassidy Hutchinson had on the media. Now, to be fair, they've been praising the January 6th committee and their brilliant performance literally since before the committee started. But the sort of over the moon, this is going to be like Watergate. Everything's like Watergate. This is going to be worse than Watergate. That reaction from the press should set you up for what exactly she said. So Michael Beschloss, for example, is supposed to be a presidential historian who really is not wonderful at his job. He's on MSNBC, says, our grandchildren will know the name Cassidy Hutchinson, which I find extraordinarily hard to believe, considering that I had to look up her name 7 different times this morning just to make sure that I said it properly, because, frankly, I don't care all that much about the January 6th committee hearings because they are mostly reinforcing stuff that I think everybody already knew. In any case, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, generations from now, 1,000 years from now, people will know the name Cassidy Hutchinson, according to Michael Beschloss.
Never before in American history have we ever seen testimony, credible testimony, this shocking against the President of the United States before Congress. This is an historic day. Our descendants are going to ask us what we know about Cassidy Hutchinson. That's a name that they will know. They're going to ask us what this was like to watch this and to listen to this, because this is a day that is going to loom very large in American history.
It's going to be, Hillary Clinton came forth to say, history will recall this day. It's going to be a historic. First of all, the number of times I've heard members of the media say that a day has been historic over the course of the last, 10 years, they say it hundreds of times. The number of actually historic days that I can remember over the course of the last 10 years, outside of like my family life, fairly limited. Anyway, here's Hillary Clinton doing this routine.
Hearings have been incredibly powerful. I understand a lot of people pay no attention, but history pays attention. I hope the Justice Department is paying attention. I hope in these midterm elections, candidates and the Democratic Party pay attention, because you cannot let those who attacked our Capitol and those who urged them on to do so act with impunity. That's what happens in dictatorships and authoritarian regimes.
Again, the people who actually went into the Capitol are all in jail right now. And there have been hundreds of prosecutions of those people. And she's assuming the case that she's attempting to, prove here, which is that Donald Trump is the person who encouraged people to go into the Capitol. Not that he encouraged them to go there and protest, not that he encouraged them to come to the rally, not that he fed them a steady stream of falsehoods about the election itself. No, none of that. That he actually urged them to go into the Capitol, which would be a criminal charge, right? Incitement to riot is actually a criminal charge in American law. That has yet to be proved. Okay, Carl Bernstein, who is hanging around for the last 50 years based on the fact that he was involved in Watergate and has not done a single bit of actual serious reporting since, he's still on CNN comparing everything to Watergate. It's a great country when you can do like one thing several decades ago and you just get to live off the legacy of that forever. It's pretty amazing, actually.
The whole idea is now absolutely confirmed, proven. He is a criminal and a seditious president of the United States. How the legal system, the Department of Justice, deals with that. And we're now talking about future obstruction evidence, as Liz Cheney indicated. Obstruction by the President of the United States, presumably, she's talking about. There is now both a legal, moral, and political case in which Donald Trump is now in a total box, including with his supporters who have gone along with his criminality, have gone along with his sedition up to now.
Okay, so again, listening to Carl Bernstein wax poetic on this is enough to make anybody's stomach turn just a little bit, considering that he's been saying that everything is as bad or worse than Watergate since Watergate happened. Like the next day, somebody spilled the milk on the counter. Like, oh my God, this is worse than Watergate. He's been doing this routine for a while. Okay, so that's the media setup. What you're about to hear is the most bombshell testimony that ever bombshelled. I mean, we are talking about howitzer level bombshells that are falling on people here. Okay, so Cassidy Hutchinson sits down and she does say some things that are somewhat revelatory. And some of these actually have some ramifications in terms of the possibility of criminal charges. Some of them are just confirmations of what we already knew. So let's go through this, and then we will discuss what she said that actually has been substantiated and what has been rebutted already. And then we will get to the sort of criminal aspect, the criminal charging aspect of this. Because again, if you're talking about the public opinion aspect of this, I don't think public opinion is radically changing based on the January 6th hearings, no matter how many times the media shout that this is groundbreaking and bombshell and all the rest. So the real question is Merrick Garland's DOJ going to pick up the baton and then try to prosecute Trump? Is there evidence that she presented that is going to provide the predicate for prosecuting Trump? Okay, so she starts, and she says that she was listening to Mark Meadows, and Mark Meadows had said that things might get really, really bad on January 6th.
After Mr. Giuliani had left the campus that evening, I went back up to our office, and I found Mr. Meadows in his office on the couch. He was scrolling through his phone. I remember leaning against the doorway and saying, I just had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. Sounds like we're going to go to the Capitol. He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, there's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real, real bad on January 6th.
Okay, things might get real, real bad on January 6th. I mean, there was a lot of consternation about January 6th. There's a lot of thought that there might be some sort of violence. Nobody thought it was going to end in the breaking into the Capitol, but that in and of itself, like things might get bad tomorrow, is not the same thing as, and I'm planning for them to get bad with the President of the United States, and I'm urging people to go into the Capitol to kill the Vice President. Seems like there's a bit of a jump from point A to point B here. Okay, so she continues in her testimony, and she says that Kevin McCarthy, for example, told Trump not to come to the Capitol. So apparently, Trump was actively considering coming to the Capitol, which we'll get to in just one second. Kevin McCarthy was telling them, don't come to the Capitol.
When Mr. McCarthy called me with this information, I answered the call and he sounded rushed, but also frustrated and angry at me. And I was confused because I didn't know what the president had just said. He then explained, the president just said he's marching to the Capitol. You told me this whole week you aren't coming up here. Why would you lie to me? I said, I'm not lying. I wasn't lying to you, sir. We're not going to the Capitol. And he said, well, he just said it on stage, Cassidy. Figure it out. Don't come up here.
Yeah, again, not sure why that is revelatory, but okay. All of this providing some color commentary to what we already knew. She also says that after January 6th, Mark Meadows expressed interest in a pardon. Now, this is an argument that people keep using over and over against people who have been involved in this case, ranging from John Eastman to Mark Meadows to members of Congress. Preemptively seeking a pardon because you believe that the people who are coming into office are going to vindictively prosecute you is not, in fact, admission of a crime. It's not. Okay, if a Democrat, I remember saying to friends when Joe Biden was about to come into office, well, I'm really glad that I overpay my taxes because if I didn't, I would assume that the IRS is going to audit me now that Joe Biden is in office. Right? That saying I wish for a preemptive pardon because I'm a high-profile figure in the prior administration and there are vindictive people coming into office is not, in fact, an admission that you committed a crime. It's saying I wish to have a protection against people who might attempt to prosecute me for a crime I didn't commit. Right? That is at least one plausible explanation. Here is Cassidy Hutchinson suggesting the opposite.
Did Rudy Giuliani ever suggest that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
He did.
Ms. Hutchinson, did White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows ever indicate that he was interested in receiving a presidential pardon related to January 6th?
Mr. Meadows did seek that pardon. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this is kind of the baseline testimony that she gives, right, is that people are acting badly, that there's a lot of worry about January 6th, that Meadows was seeking a pardon afterward. She did testify that Mark Meadows was on the phone with people like Roger Stone and with other people who were supposedly organizing with the Proud Boys. We haven't seen those dots connected yet. And it's worth remembering here that Roger Stone, who has had his house raided by the DOJ before, Roger Stone, in fact, has not been prosecuted for his activities in and surrounding January 6th. Then we get to the really colorful parts, right? These are the ones that the media are just focused in like a laser beam. This is the stuff that's really the groundbreaking, electrifying testimony here from Cassidy Hutchinson, again, an aide to Mark Meadows, who testified yesterday and was supposedly changed the entire game. A catch-up story. So she says that Trump was very unhappy with somebody and he flung a plate with ketchup against the wall. Here's the explanation.
I left the office and went down to the dining room, and I noticed that the door was propped open and the valet was inside the dining room changing the tablecloth off of the dining room table. He motioned for me to come in and then pointed towards the front of the room near the fireplace mantle and the TV, where I first noticed there was ketchup dripping down the wall and there's a shattered porcelain plate on the floor. The valet had articulated that the president was extremely angry at the Attorney General's AP interview and had thrown his lunch against the wall.
So apparently he was very mad at Attorney General Bill Barr for doing an AP interview in which he said he saw no evidence of significant voter fraud. And now, you know how we know that Trump was mad about that? Because Bill Barr has said that in his memoir. In fact, Donald Trump asked for his resignation based on that AP interview. So I'm not aware that throwing a plate with ketchup against the wall is really all that indicative of something we didn't know, other than that Trump has himself a massive temper, which, again, is not particularly shocking. I think the only thing that we really found out from that particular revelation, which the media ran with because it's very colorful, right? The testimony of the president taking a plate with ketchup and throwing it against the wall is very evocative. The only thing I learned from that really is that Donald Trump must have been eating a steak that day, because why else would he have ketchup on his plate? He's a man who loves ketchup with his steak, which to me is the most damning detail about the man, perhaps, is that he loves ketchup on his steak. In any case, this was a piece that the media picked up on. And then there were two other pieces. So she says that during the riots, she heard, again, this is a lot of this is secondhand. This is part of the problem here, is that she will say that I heard from X, who was there, what happened. So she says that Trump didn't stop the rioters because he thought that Mike Pence deserved it. She didn't hear Trump actually say that. She heard somebody say that Trump was saying that. So here we go.
I remember Pat saying something to the effect of, Mark, we need to do something more. They're literally calling for the vice president to be effing hung. And Mark had responded something to the effect of, you heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. To which Pat said something, this is effing crazy.
Okay, so we'd already heard this in media reports as well, right? Is that Trump was watching this on TV and he really didn't care because he was mad. We'll discuss whether that involves a criminal charge or not, but the short answer is no. I mean, you sitting there and not doing anything to prevent a criminal activity is not quite the same thing as you actively conspiring to engage in a criminal activity as part of a conspiracy, for example, which is what this committee is attempting to prove. Okay, then we actually get, here's the biggest one. Okay, so we've done a few of these, done ketchup against the wall. We've done that Mark Meadows suggested that Trump didn't care if Mike Pence was hanged, which again, we have that on record like a couple of weeks ago. We have her saying that Mark Meadows wanted a pardon. Okay, but here is the biggest story of all. The biggest story of all, and this is like wild stuff, if it were true. What she says is that Donald Trump got into the car after the January 6th rally, and everybody was headed down to the Capitol. And you remember during the rally, he had said, I'm going to lead you down to the Capitol building. He said, I want to march with you down to the Capitol building. So he gets in the car, and she says that she heard from somebody that the way that this went down is that Donald Trump then demanded to be driven to the Capitol so he could lead this rally down to the Capitol, and that he then got rather angry in the car when his Secret Service told him they didn't have the capacity to do that. Here is her testimony.
The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
So, according to Hutchinson, Donald Trump gets in the car and he says, I want to go to the Capitol. And Secret Service says, sir, we can't take you to the Capitol because it's not safe and it's not secure over there. And he then gets so angry that he lunges at the Secret Service agent and wraps his hands around his throat and starts to strangle the Secret Service agent. That's pretty shocking stuff. The one other claim that she made that was also bombshell-like was she said that there was one point where Trump was informed, and this she said she personally heard, where Trump was informed that there were weapons in the crowd and there were magnetizers, right? People were walking through magnetic scanners to do metal detector checks. And Trump said, I want to get rid of those because he wanted a bigger crowd walking toward the Capitol. And they said, well, there are weapons in the crowd, sir. He said, well, they're not here for me. Right? They're not going to hurt me. Okay, now there are a couple of ways of reading that. One way of reading that is that Trump is saying they're not going to hurt me, but they are going to hurt them. And I love that. That's great. The other way is, well, I don't care. They're not going to hurt me. They're not going to hurt. I mean, they're my fans. They're not going to hurt me. And I'm going to go walk among them. I'm not worried about their weapons for me. Both readings are somewhat plausible. I find the second a little more plausible considering he was speaking directly to his own Secret Service agents who are directed to protect him. Okay, so that is the background. Okay, so now we get to the fact that some of this testimony has now been rebutted by people on the record. And this is a big problem. Like within hours, there were people who were coming out and rebutting details of this. So NBC News reported yesterday, like almost immediately after Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, that a Secret Service agent was now prepared to testify that the story about Trump in the limo threatening people and trying to strangle Secret Service, that just wasn't true. Here's NBC News reporting this.
A source close to the Secret Service is telling you that the lead agent disputes some of Hutchinson's testimony?
Yeah, so let's walk right through that now, Tom, if we can. That source close to the Secret Service tells me that both the lead agent, Bobby Engel, and the driver of that presidential limousine, the SUV, are prepared to testify under oath that neither man was assaulted and that Mr. Trump never lunged for the steering wheel. Again, we haven't heard from either of these individuals under oath publicly. They did both testify in the past. It's unclear whether they were asked a specific question as related to this incident. We are reaching out to the committee for more details on that.
Now, one of the things that's weird here is that there have been Secret Service agents who have actually been called in, I assume, to testify to the January 6th committee. And the January 6th committee takes all of these testimonies and they tape them. And they actually have been playing clips of the testimony in the open hearing. Well, why don't we have any corroborative evidence from the Secret Service agents played on tape here? They've been doing that the entire time. ABC News, by the way, reported the same thing as NBC News, which is that Secret Service is denying this story.
Two sources familiar with the investigation confirmed that President Trump had requested to go to the Capitol on January 6th and that the Secret Service refused due to security concerns. One of those sources telling me that the president did return to the vehicle after his speech on the morning of January 6th and asked Agent Robert Engel if he could go to the Capitol. Engel said something to the effect of that being unwise or dangerous and that the motorcade was going to take the president back to the White House. A source close to the Secret Service just told me to expect that the Secret Service will push back against any allegation of an assault against an agent or President Trump reaching for the steering wheel.
Okay, by the way, I know members of the Secret Service who were there while Donald Trump was president of the United States, and they said that he was actually quite genteel and kind to them, which is not a particular shock. He's actually very nice to the people who are in his direct orbit. In any case, that was one piece of the testimony that was rebutted. Another piece of the testimony now rebutted, according to ABC News. Former Trump White House lawyer Eric Hirschman is claiming a handwritten note regarding a potential statement for then President Donald Trump to release during the January 6th attack on the Capitol was written by him during a meeting at the White House that afternoon, not by Cassidy Hutchinson. At Tuesday's January 6th committee hearing, Liz Cheney displayed a handwritten note which Hutchinson testified she wrote after Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows handed her a note card and pen to take his dictation. Sources familiar with the matter said Hirschman had previously told the committee that he had penned the note. The handwritten note Cassidy Hutchinson testified was written by her was in fact written by Eric Hirschman on January 6, 2021. All sources with direct knowledge in law enforcement have and will confirm it was written by Mr. Hirschman, the spokesperson said. She said during her testimony, that's a note I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff January 6th, likely around 3 o'clock. And Liz Cheney asked, it's written on the Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson? She said, that's my handwriting. So, you know, you have a conflict in the testimony there. Now, does that refute every bit of the testimony? No. I mean, maybe she forgot. Maybe she got it wrong with regard to the note. And as far as her testimony about what happened in the Secret Service vehicle, she was saying that secondhand anyway. I mean, it was pretty clearly hearsay evidence. I mean, she's speaking about something she heard from somebody who supposedly was there. But federal rules of evidence don't really apply. In this case, it's not a criminal trial. So when she says that sort of stuff, it matters whether that was true or whether that was not true. Again, the main allegation, the one that they're going to have to hang their hat on here, is not going to be catch up against the wall or Donald Trump saying that he wanted to go down and lead like he said in his speech, again, on television, that he wanted to go and walk down with them. So him saying to Secret Service, I want to go with them, and then Secret Service being like, no, you can't, sir, it's not safe. The idea that the committee wants you to draw from this is that Donald Trump wanted to lead a riot against the Capitol. Again, there would have to be another dot connected. If you're talking about criminal liability, you'd have to show that it wasn't just that Donald Trump wanted to go lead a rally on the steps of the Capitol and yell at the people inside. That wouldn't be enough. You'd have to show that he actively wanted to incite a riot that broke into the Capitol to do physical violence to members of Congress in order to obstruct the proceedings of the Congress that day. Who's got two thumbs and wants you to like and subscribe?